I'll call this December 14th, 2020 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board to order. This by remote participation under the governor's directions. Anybody has any problems with the way it's working, let us know. Chris watches Q&A and the chat, I guess, right, Chris? So if somebody's not, we can talk. Just lost Justin's video again. All right, let's there he is. Let's do a sort of a roll call or checking to see who's here and who can hear. Dave?
I'm here.
Justin?
I am here.
Here? You tell me if you, I can hear her without Zoom, so you have to help me if that doesn't work.
Can everyone hear me?
Can everyone hear Linda?
Okay.
Good.
Prabhu's here.
Prabhu's here. I'm here. Vikram is
Present.
present. Chris is here. Chris,
Present.
help us out.
We have staff Natalia Allward.
Yeah.
Rob Aberg from Grafton Land Trust.
Hayberg here.
Sorry. Amanda Cavalieri.
Present.
Sorry. Robert Flynn.
Here.
And I believe that is all for who's on right now. Oh, and James Tatro is connecting to audio.
Okay. First item of business is public input. This is when we let anyone who has something to say to us that isn't on our agenda a chance. Is there any public input?
As of right now, there's no attendees, so the panelists here are who's in attendance. So
Seem to be true. Okay, so we'll move on. Actually, I thought we did some of these already, but okay, you can explain. 20 special permit 2020-02 SPA Alfonso Village.
yeah, so this is the mixed-use development, Alfonso Village. They're coming before the board for plan endorsement. I did reach out to the Registry of Deeds to see, given COVID and a lot of the remote work going on, concerns related to all of that, what their process for actual plan endorsement would be, if they would allow the board to authorize the planner to sign in their place. In that discussion, they mentioned that, as the board well knows, the Registry of Deed plans really become sacred documents, and so they will not be allowing authorization of the board to, other than the A&R, which we've specifically designated. They will not be allowing the board to authorize me to sign in their place. So we will need to, if the board finds favorably for endorsement, we will need to have members stop by the municipal office, set up a time, and I'll come out and provide the plans for their signature. It's a bit of a process, and I guess we'll just have to ask that the applicants be understanding of that's the process that the registry is giving us, and we're going to do the best we can to make that timely, but we'll need flexibility on that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fine. We've been finding that with a lot of the local boards at this time. So, and it was overlooked on my end, but also with COVID, the delay in getting them to the board as well. So we understand, as long as the project is approved and that still allows the contractor to continue moving.
Yeah.
Chris, just,
One
I
thing, as a board, we might try and somehow to simplify it. There's so many Mylars to be signed that we kind of pick a time when you can set them up and at least more than one of us come in and do the signing at one time so that you don't have to do it, 5 different times. And we should talk about the idea of finding a solution for that, even if it isn't town hall, someplace that we can lay all, because there's 30 some sheets to be signed. So if we could do it in a reason, in a kind of a sane manner, it would be great.
Yep. For this project is 13, I'm seeing on my PDF, but yeah.
Well, nothing.
Yeah, exactly. The question I was going to have though is that with the municipal center closed to non-staff, would we, as far as the town administrator and the board of health are concerned, would we be considered staff in regards to this? That we would go inside and sign with an appointment, or is this something that we would have to have you come out possibly in the rain or whatever and do that?
Yeah, so I'd have to check with the town administrator and clarify in terms of board members and access to the municipal building, where that falls. So that is an added complication. I do believe that to limit access to the building, I could come out and obviously weather permitting, we could sign outside. But to Linda's point, I can look into if there's an alternative location that we can set up a time, to coordinate to meet to sign the documents, which may allow to kind of spread out the sheets and make things a little easier. So not ideal, but we're gonna have to work through it. So I'll look into an alternative space, but I'm also happy to bring the plans out and worst case scenario, if we have a folding table or something that we can put them out on and do it that way.
Depending on what use is being made of the gym, I could imagine several folding tables, and you'd be able to spread them out so that, for another week, come in, we wouldn't have to all be at the same window. And I think we might have more to sign here. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need a vote to,
I'll make the motion that we find favorably on these plans and vote to have the board endorse them, with the logistics of which to be decided offline.
Second.
moved in second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. It carries. Okay,
Thank you.
good luck. Plan approval and endorsement. Definitive plan 2020-01, Happy Woods. Is this the same story?
Same story, pretty much copy paste. So
All right. I'll move that we do the same as the last one, to vote to in the affirmative of endorsing these plans, and move to do so when is convenient.
Second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carries. Moving right along. As-built plan and lot release request, Meadowbrook Manor.
Yep. So this project, I did go out with Graves Engineering and Mr. Flynn, the project developer. They have put down the binder course, and the drainage infrastructure is in place. They're looking for a lot release request to get started on foundations and putting in the wells for the structure. And kind of reviewing the decision, we noted, there are still trees that the board required as buffering on one of the lots. They provided a narrative, and I noted in the decision that those are tied to the occupancy permit. So we're still well within those guidelines. And so I've been in discussions with Mr. Flynn about the trees, and obviously the planting those during the winter months, or or with the drought without the wells in place would be detrimental to the trees, and so they're going to be looking to plant those in the spring. That said, I don't see any issue with releasing the lots as it is covered under the occupancy permit.
Any discussion? Any questions?
I'll move that we release the lot with the aforementioned reasons.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Hey,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carries. Moving along.
What about the as-built plan?
Sorry, yeah, so the motion was for the lot release. We're also asking for the as-built plan endorsement to be signed. So that will be a similar process. We'll have to have the board come by and sign those in whatever process.
Apologies for not including that in my motion. I'll move that we approve the as-built plan and similarly sign it when we can.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Now, moving on. Scenic Road Permit, SP 2020-02 at 88 Adams Road.
So this is the scenic road permit tied to the ridings. I did draft the decision. I apologize. I sent that later tonight via email. I'm happy to pull that up and go through it. I think the findings in that decision are where the board kind of left off, and would want to go add narrative one way or the other in terms of that decision and discussion. But most of it I left kind of ambiguous. I did add some of the, I think, comments that I picked up from the discussion the board has had and the facts of the case as findings. But beyond that, I think we'll need some work in drafting the remainder of the findings.
So we're going to talk about it tonight. Vote.
If the board is comfortable kind of administratively, discussing the findings here, we can go through each of the findings that the board has in a scenic road permit and have that discussion. And if the board is at a consensus, we could move forward with finalizing the decision, or I can come back with an actual, at the board's direction, come back with a finalized version per that discussion that we had.
I went back. I couldn't find where we saw a drawing that the tree on the sight line business. And I was sure there had been one, but this goes back far enough that it's pretty hard. So I didn't find that we actually required that tree to be removed, did we? I think it was in somewhere in the traffic report, but I didn't find it back through it.
So the two trees to be removed, there's a 24-inch oak tree and a 18-inch, I believe, ash. Both of those are proposed to be removed for sight lines, and providing adequate sight lines to the intersection of the proposed subdivision.
I understand, but we didn't make that a requirement, did we? I couldn't find where we made it a requirement to do that. I thought we had, but
No, Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in.
Sure.
Now, we back much earlier in the process, we were asked to study specifically the adequacy of line of sight looking north. And that was discussed, and how road lowering would be necessary to improve that. But at no point was in that process were specific trees looked at as this is obstructing the view to a certain degree and this has to be removed. You're correct. It was not part of that discussion.
Okay. Well, I for one, would say we could approve the permit on the condition that the value of the tree is given to the town and that it be directed towards scenic road maintenance and improvement. Anybody else have any thoughts?
That was my biggest reason for myself to potentially deny this, was the idea that there's a value to this tree that, you know, the town experts have, you know, to the extent that they are experts, have shown us that there's a value, have articulated that, and the applicant has not offered anything rebuttal other than their desire to not pay that. You know, that was, you know, from the open session for me on this one. And, you know, with it being a scenic road, I don't see this as being a safety danger, you know, like the applicant had asserted as it stands, you know, with the existing conditions. And I don't, you know, if we can, you know, if we do approve with that condition, I'm okay. I would be okay with approving it. But that would mean that the applicant either pays that or this is considered denied in the end.
Well, I mean, as far as that goes, if we we approve this with the condition that the applicant provide that compensation, then I guess if the applicant could appeal or the applicant could pay, or, you know, that's really about the only, I mean, if the applicant tells us now that that they absolutely refuse to, you know, provide that particular compensation, I suppose we would perhaps deny it on that basis. But I think from everything we've said, approving it with the condition of the $8,000 payment would seem to be the course that the board is leaning towards.
Anybody else with thoughts? Probably.
I had one question. So this is a project which I have come in, both Justin and I, we have come in newer into the process, right? There have been historical discussions. So I recollect one of the benefits that I understood was substantial amount of land that is going to be open space or donated to the town.
But that was the compensation that got them the other waivers. They have waivers that we don't usually give on road layout, for example. That was give and take 3 or 4 years ago, whenever it was. This is a separate thing. And this is a whole different part of our responsibility with scenic roads. The town scenic roads, the town feels are valuable assets. And we have laws to protect them. And it falls on the board to do it.
Yeah, but here, for better or for worse, we're looking at the scenic road aspect of it. And it's, while it is related to the subdivision, it's we kind of want to look at the scenic road aspect of this as somewhat separate from the decisions or, you know, the actions on the subdivision. It is just looking at it from a scenic road perspective. And it's connected to the subdivision in the sense that the reason for doing this is the addition of a road, you know, intersecting with Adams Road. And the fact is that for that road, this tree basically needs to be removed to provide adequate sight distance for traffic safety purposes.
That wasn't established, Dave. I don't think.
I'll say that was the applicant's assertion. I don't believe we established that as fact. That was my recollection as well.
Yes, we looked at it.
Sorry, I missed that point. What was that, Justin? Can you repeat that?
I believe the applicant's assertion was that this tree needed to be removed for safety reasons with regards to their subdivision, as well as, according to the applicant, regular traffic on Adams Road. I don't believe we established that as a fact. I just believe it was the applicant's assertion that was so.
And, if you look at it from that perspective, then there has not been established a reason for removing the tree. From what we've done in other scenic road situations, that are somewhat similar to this, where a tree is basically, due to whatever other changes are being made, that tree has been established as posing a hazard to public safety. If the board hasn't established to our satisfaction that this tree needs to be removed for public safety purposes, then it's not clear that we should be allowing it for this particular tree, regardless of compensation.
Which brings us back to a denial rather than.
Can the applicant speak?
Yes, go.
My question is for my engineer, James. James, was this tree recommended to be removed by the traffic person, or because if it doesn't need to be removed, I prefer not to remove it. If it's not an issue, I'm not looking to remove the tree for that sake.
To the chair, in my judgment, it does need to be removed because it's not very far from the proposed intersection, and it is in a position and has significant width, significant diameter, such that it will briefly block a driver leaving the new road, leaving Libby Lane, from seeing a car approaching at a certain point from the south. And it's in that way, it's a hazard to a degree that I believe should be removed.
It's recommended, correct? It's not mandatory.
Yeah, not required by us, at least not at this point. Did your traffic report call out this tree as needing to be removed? Either of them? I couldn't find it when I looked.
It didn't, Mr. To the chair, it did not. It's my recommendation upon when we looked at the trees at the intersection. Again, there was one at each corner of the right of way, right on the line of the new right of way. And looking at those and taking a picture of those, I saw that this 24-inch tree in front of the Underwoods at number 86 was a potential problem, such that we would ask that it be I recommended that we ask that it be cut down.
Okay, I think we've been around and around. Anybody else have something? We have to decide what we want us to do.
Have any members of the board seen this tree? And if you determine that it's not a hazard,
We got out of our car and looked at it, and in the mud and stuff, and indeed did look at it. And, it's a tree on the road, just as there are trees as you come out from many driveways. And I personally didn't think it presented a hazard,
Including our driveway.
including our driveway. And
Trees on both sides.
the thing is, it's something that if down the line, it really looked like it was going to become a hazard as it developed, that decision could be made at a later date. It doesn't have to be done as part of this, frankly. That can happen at any time, that we can, the town can be petitioned and say, look, it's a hazard from that. The people who live there can petition and say, can we get that tree out of our sight line? But I don't see any reason to stop this project but based on the tree and to hold this all up on that. I think the tree is fine where it is right now.
No.
I think it's a wait and see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll echo that a little bit. I drove by, I stopped there. I didn't get out of my car in this particular instance because, like Linda said, it was muddy, and I didn't feel like, unlike her, I did not feel like getting my shoes all muddy. But it definitely did not appear to be any different than trees elsewhere in terms of distance and size of other entranceways that are on our scenic roads. So I did not feel that this was necessarily anything that was strongly a requirement to do. I do think it would improve sight lines, and the people driving this road in the future would have a safer exit, but that does not mean they will not have a safe exit with it still in place. That was my feeling.
Okay, I think that we're pretty well focused in on saying no at this point.
Well, let's just to be clear, the request includes 2 trees, correct?
Correct.
And
Three actually.
3 actually, yes. So the tree that we're discussing is one of those 3 trees.
Yeah.
The tree warden has basically said that the other 2 trees, if I remember correctly, and didn't look at it, in preparation for the meeting tonight, but the tree warden really judged the other 2 trees as being of less value, or essentially no value, as components of a scenic road. So what the board could do is approve the request with respect to those 2 trees, but deny permission to remove the oak tree. And as others have noted, subsequently, it would be possible to return to the board with a request relative to that tree with evidence, documenting the public safety requirement for it to be removed. When that happens, that could happen at any time. But I think what we've really established here tonight in the discussion is that the board does not have any evidence before it to document a need to remove that tree, a need that is that outweighs the scenic value of the tree. And as noted, that could be changed with sufficient evidence, but right now, to keep this process from dragging on, it seems like the board's best course of action is to approve the request for 2 of the trees, deny it for this 1 tree that we're having trouble with.
I don't remember there being 2 more. I remember there is 1 more. I think if there's no one that strongly has a different point of view, I'd say let's ask Chris to shape a decision around whatever these guidelines. Is that acceptable to all the board members?
Yes.
I have one slight suggestion on this, that if I may, Mr. Chair, just because of the timeline till our next meeting, that if the board is happy with it, I would make the motion and vote on this decision with the provision that the chair reviews the final. I would be okay with that, but that's up to, I'll do that.
Are we going to be meeting?
Not before January on schedule.
Hmm?
Not before January, according to the schedule, if I recall correctly.
Still shows
How do we get video?
We have one meeting scheduled for the 28th, I think it is.
Oh, then I apologize. Yeah, that's sooner than I thought.
I guess given Zoom, it's probably easier for us to have that meeting. Normally, we don't have it, but at our next meeting when it happens.
Okay, yeah, that's earlier than I thought, so that satisfies my
Okay.
thoughts.
So is everybody okay with doing that?
Yeah. So just
So ordered.
right. This is basically a deliberation on the decision, and planner can then complete the decision along the lines that we've discussed tonight, and we can give it a final review and a vote at the next meeting.
I think that's what I suggested.
Yep.
Okay. It being now past 7:30, it's time for us to move on to our hearings. First of all, definitive plan approval, DP 2020-02 at 11 Wheeler Road. I think that what we've been working on is the question of a waiver for the for our rule intersection distances. Got a letter, memo, whatever. Council. About it.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if it's not letting me. Yeah, and so these are the project plans. The part of the waiver and discussion was on the ADA applicability of the material in terms of the Grafton Land Trust taking over maintenance of the proposed kind of trails. So we did receive a memo from the attorney Eli Leno on behalf of the McGriffs. I believe Mr. Leno is on the call if you'd like to discuss some of those details.
Happily. Good to see everyone again. For the record, Eli Leno from Mayor Antonellis, Jackowitz, and Haranis, representing Stan and Lisa McGriff, the applicants. I did some research into the case law and also the statutes regarding grants of waivers in the Commonwealth. Mr. Chairman, did you receive the copy of this memorandum?
I did.
Okay. I know that we'd had some issues getting our stuff in, so I just wanted to confirm. The really one sentence gist of the law is that planning boards have broad discretion about granting waivers because the state and the courts have upheld the fact that nobody knows your town better than you do. And that's certainly true in Grafton. So the things that are able here in terms of granting a waiver and balancing that against the public good are that we can do a project that is directly on site at Wheeler Road, something that would benefit the public good. What we had proposed and which would be allowed is that if we improve something for the Grafton Land Trust, which I think no one disputes benefits the public good as a whole, the land trust in general through their mission of preservation and protection of lands for the use by the public and residents of Grafton, or that we could do something entirely off-site and that would still be upheld under the broad discretion as if the board saw fit to balance the the scales that what we were providing would be worth it to the public. So we have several options. With regard to the ADA compliance issue, I spoke to Rob Aberg about this, and they're in a spot where, obviously, I won't speak for the Grafton Land Trust in as much as Rob is on the call tonight and can follow up after this. But with the ADA compliance issue open on that piece of land, there's a potential that it makes more sense for something to be done either off-site or, again, if we provide money so that the Grafton Land Trust may do what they see fit to best serve their mission of benefiting the public. In the memo, we talk about the fact that we're willing to do this on-site work, or we would be willing to donate $13,000 to the Grafton Land Trust. The way that the McGriffs came up with that dollar figure is that the site work was quoted by the contractor who would hopefully be doing work at this site if we get subdivision approval, was about $10,500. And our expectation, having done various projects all over the place, is that if certain things aren't exactly the conditions you expect, maybe there'd be an overage. So that's why we built in that buffer. So I know that Mr. Aberg had discussed potentially an in-kind donation of certain work somewhere. And if that's what works best for the town and works best for the land trust as recipient here, the third-party beneficiary, we are certainly open to whatever makes sense. But again, in my memorandum, the point was to synthesize the law and show that there are various ways for us to meet that requirement. And the McGriffs, I believe, are generously hoping that they can benefit the public in exchange for this waiver that is under a portion of the bylaws, excuse me, not even bylaws, subdivision rules and regulations, which is why you can waive it, not a variance, that the public record doesn't show exactly how you came up in this town with 600 feet as the requirement. And I know that before the world changed entirely this spring, former Chairman Robbins had been talking about maybe looking into that and seeing if we could get a better record for how that's supported. So as it stands now, we think that that would be a generous option and a way to benefit the public of Grafton while also hopefully receiving this waiver, which, again, by the way we've designed this with the flexible subdivision rules, does also preserve basically 2 acres that are adjacent to this already preserved land trust land. So I think that there's a broad benefit to the public at large here.
May I ask a question?
Speak up.
Mr. Is it Leno?
It's Leno.
I'm absolutely not a lawyer. Not at all. I'm a scientist. But I would wonder that the Grafton Land Trust is actually a private organization. It's not a town organization. It's a group of private citizens that have formed an organization that has land in the town that they allow public access to have access to it. I'm not so sure that we could even enter into any kind of agreement or even find that a donation to a private organization like that is really part of the idea of a benefit to the town. I mean, it may be ultimately a benefit to the town, but you're involving a private organization in that. And I'm not so sure that that's a really, I'm a little uncomfortable with that idea. It's nothing against the land trust. I mean, they're very great people and they have done wonderful things for the town. It's just they're not the town of Grafton, and they aren't even an organization that is part of the town of Grafton.
Before I respond, I apologize. Am I speaking with Mrs. Hassinger or?
Yeah, Linda.
We're sitting next to each other and I have
Okay.
one microphone.
All right. Sorry, I was just trying to figure out. So understood. I think that is certainly a valuable consideration, but again, that there is this broad availability of recourse for a planning board. I think that you have the ability to condition our decision with certain strings that has to be shown to have been used for a public project, so that I don't know. I certainly have full faith in the land trust, but certain strings that it's not just a bonus to some member of their board or something. But I do think that, I apologize. Go ahead.
That's a tricky point. I just don't distrust the land trust at all. But I think that's something that we have to work out with them, to be very careful as to how it's worded and what the legal involvement of the town is in that, because money is going to them through the town and that kind of thing. That's something that needs to at least be considered in the background.
If I may, when there's the break, I
Okay.
don't know.
I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Leno, did you have something more to say before I jump in?
No, I certainly will always defer to the board.
No problem. Okay, so I have a slightly different opinion than Mrs. Hassinger on this one. I think the fact that the Grafton Land Trust is a 501c3 organization, it benefits Grafton directly as part of their charge. To me, that is a very direct line of public benefit for any donations that go to that organization. Yes, the funding is privately directed by that organization, but they can only legally do so per their charge that granted them the 501c3. That's my understanding. Of course, I'm not a lawyer as well, but I've been involved for many years with a company that was a subsidiary of a 501c3. So I know a thing or two, not a ton, but a bit about that. So that's my overall impression on, is this a public good to donate to the Grafton Land Trust? That said, I think the primary desire of the applicant, from my understanding, as well as the Grafton Land Trust, was the physical and direct improvements of the trail abutting this property. And that would be the opportune solution. We just got a little bit of a wrinkle with regard to the ADA mention that was earlier. And I don't feel that comfortable blocking a decision on a resolution of that separate issue that is not in any one of us in this call's purview to solve.
Yeah, and let me chip in one more point of information relative to the land trust. As most of you know, I'm working on the open space and recreation plan, and in particular on the inventory of open space. And for the purposes, at least, of what the state recognizes as the town's open space, the land trust enjoys a particularly important position in that in Grafton they are a big part of Grafton's open space. But generally speaking, land trusts are considered to be as stewards of open space that's properly considered as part of the town, as much as the town's the open space that town owns on its own. So I think the land trust is from any number of points of view is really there for the benefit of the public of Grafton. And I wouldn't worry too much. We could consult counsel to see if there's any wrinkles we need to be aware of if we do approve this, and including the condition of one or another kind of support to the trust.
Linda's point had occurred to me too, of course. I think if we said to do it, no one would stop us from doing it. But it is a little bit off of public benefit. But for me, it's a different consideration. That is it a sufficient benefit to balance the cost? This intersection will be there after we're all dead, and the traffic will still be going by it. It'll still be a couple hundred feet from 22. It'll still be on that hill. It'll still be where that car skidded off into the water and the person almost died up on the hill. So I'm leaving that behind for forever. And I just don't feel, I don't know what would be a sufficient benefit. But so far, it's just, I feel.
if I may, I can speak a little bit more to the point of why that limit exists. I have recently been doing some investigation around the question of separation of intersections. And so unlike when I spoke earlier that Attorney Leno cited, I have come up with some, I think, interesting information relative to that. And there's what I found in looking at a couple of different design guidelines documents that cover the question of intersection separations or offsets, and a little bit over 24 sets of subdivision rules and regulations from various towns in our area and beyond, looking for similar limits in these various subdivisions. I've documented all that in a memo I just had posted for under the topic of subdivision rules and regulations. And it got posted very late this afternoon, so I doubt that anybody's had much of a chance to read through it. But if I can briefly summarize it, the study that I engaged in basically comes up with a couple of interesting results. One is that most of the subdivision rules and regulations that do treat this topic treat it in two separate ways. One is with the what they often call a jog, that is a side street intersecting with the main, two side streets intersecting with the main road, but at an offset from one another, which is the case here as an example with the proposed subdivision road and what's the road uphill from that?
Meadow Lane.
Yeah. So that's a case where you have the roads coming into Wheeler Road from opposite sides, but offset from one another. And the general recommendation for the separation between those two is on the order of 125 to 150 feet. Most of the subdivision rules that explicitly address this topic set that kind of a limit. And the reasoning behind that is that you worry about traffic conflicts when you have vehicles entering the main road from both of those side roads and turning in such a way that they could come into conflict. And so the important factor there is a stopping sight distance. And that's really, it's entirely a safety factor. That's why they seem to be comfortable with, and again, as I said, there are a lot of towns that do it this way. What they call a jog, the opposite side intersections. They're looking for a separation of between 125 and 150 feet in most cases. The other separation, which is between two roads entering on the same side, they're looking at that primarily from the point of view of a subdivision design where you have a corner lot, and then you want to have at least a separate, you want to have those roads at least two lots apart and maybe more. Some of them actually refer to that as block size or block length. And in two cases, they are parameterizing it specifically as the frontage for two lots, sometimes even going so far as to vary that depending upon the lot frontage for a particular zone. But the philosophy behind that limit is primarily subdivision design to make sure that you don't have like two roads coming in the same on two sides of one lot. You want to keep them far enough apart, and those limits vary much more widely. There are a number of towns that set that in the neighborhood of a couple hundred feet, and some of them go up to the 600 feet that we have. I think one of them was even more. I forgot off the top of my head. But in any case, I noticed in that also that Grafton's 600 to 1,200 feet was borrowed directly from four other towns of the ones I reviewed. And there are a lot more than the 27 I reviewed, but it seems clear that we borrowed that from them. And one of them, most of them, the majority of the regulations I looked at do not explain why. they chose those numbers or what those, you know, those are intended to accomplish. But those that do explain their reasoning are consistent in talking about the 600-foot number, comparable to what we use, as being a factor in subdivision design to have subdivision roads separated by 2 or more lots. So that's basically what I found out so far. The board ultimately can discuss this further in terms of how we want to apply it to us, but I was able to find no other reason for specifying limits on those separations. Those 2 reasons are important. Safety, which actually applies to, you know, regardless of which side the road's coming. You want, when you have 2 roads intersecting with a main road or a through road, you know, safety dictates that they be sufficiently far apart that the cars turning in on the turning from the side road onto the main road don't conflict with one another without the ability to stop in time. And then just subdivision design, and in those few cases where they also have an upper limit, they appear to be wanting to avoid subdivisions with very long roads with just nothing but lined with houses. But it's really subdivision design and traffic safety are the two drivers for these limits.
Yeah. 2 things. One is that discussion is a little bit more under our looking at future changes in our rules, not looking at this particular situation if we ever decide to change the rules, then you look for compliance with whatever we change them to. Right now, though, we're looking for compliance with the rules that we have and have had for a very long time. The other thing is, this situation involves the road that's too close is 122, major road, more than 20,000 cars a day, I think. Dead end coming up to it. So that's a little different than a lot of the how do you design subdivisions. That's part of when I look at this intersection in this place, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that Wheeler Road doesn't comply with our rules either when it comes down the hill and beats Worcester Street in terms of slope and leveling area, which is part of what makes it not all that safe.
I would like to point out that if this subdivision were built with the subdivision road 600 feet away from Worcester Street, the traffic situation at Worcester Street would be identical. That is, the distance of this road from Worcester Street makes no difference for the performance of the Worcester Street intersection with the traffic, you know, with or without this subdivision. If this subdivision contributes enough traffic to the Worcester Street intersection to be unacceptable, then that's unacceptable regardless of where this subdivision road intersects with Wheeler.
I agree.
Okay, we have our feelings.
I would like to point out that while the information I dug up was primarily intended to inform a discussion of possible subdivision rules changes, it also can be helpful in determining whether or not a waiver for this situation, should we choose to approve it, would lead to an unsafe situation. In other words, if this road were to offset from 50 feet from Meadow Lane, it would be, I could not see granting a waiver for that because that would produce a traffic safety problem. So it's informative, at least to the extent of, if the board considers a waiver, consider whether the waiver is compatible with, you know, not just our existing rule, but the reasons for existence of the rule.
As I mentioned before, rules aren't all just for that. Some of the rules are how the town wants its roads developed and the layout of the road system. How do we proceed at this point?
Bob, I had an input on.
Yes.
Right. So my input, I'm not too sure if there have been any cases in the past wherein we had a project for a pool, let's say in South Grafton, and the benefits or the compensation for that project due to the waivers are to be passed on to, say, North Grafton or something of that kind. So my point here being, the preference for me is if something is approved and a waiver is approved here in this case, I would rather have that the benefits for that waiver or that compensate for the waiver be an on-site one, which is in this case the trail that benefits the neighbors to some degree. We can call it the McRib Trail for what matters, and they can claim credit for it for a good reason, but let it be localized instead of doing one part here. The last part is I'm not very comfortable with this money dealing. I feel that I don't know if you have done it, but if you have not done it, keep money away. Let there be quantified fees. The money part, any dollar, it loses value over a period of time. 13,000 now is nothing 5 years from now.
Just don't ask for the benefit, no money, or no.
Yeah, only in kind, not in terms of no cash.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
Actually, it's pretty rare that we have anything like this. I think. I haven't seen talking about money and going someplace for something. Well, there haven't been that many actually.
If I may.
Stuck to our 600 feet. Okay, well,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Leno was looking to say something, and I was also wondering before he goes if any input from Mr. Aberg would help either yourself or anyone else on the board.
Yeah,
I don't know if Mr. Aberg has anything to add to what was said or could answer questions or anything, but I didn't know if he could be of help here.
You got off before I got to ask Rob if he had input. No. Hello.
Did you want me to go?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we received our complaint from the state, and so they're insisting, different from the Grafton tax assessor, that we do have a recreation facility on the premises, which we don't have a facility as our position. So we're going to discuss that further with the state. So at this time, very happy to receive the conservation land. Was it 2 or 2.8 acres? It was a good amount of the property of the McGriffs, that for us to conserve that in our mission. Right now, doing work on trails that could be construed as creating facilities is not something our attorney advises us to do, to muddy the waters with the Architectural Access Board. But in terms of other locations to do similar work, I could weigh in on that if there was a proposal. If the board, but first I think the board would have to decide what would be the acceptable benefit, so that Mr. Leno and the McGriffs could respond to that. Is my just going through my head, that if you guys said what was necessary, because if they keep playing 20 questions, it may be tedious for you. Thanks.
May I address Mr. Aberg and the board? I agree with your position there, that obviously there is some question outstanding as to what benefit is required to offset this waiver. And I know from actually almost 4 years in front of this board now, believe it or not, that the chairman's position in general is that these subdivision laws or regulations shouldn't be waived unless there is, a very strong reason for it. And I do think, as an aside here, that the McGriffs, through the guidance of the board in the preliminary phase, as we've now moved to definitive, going to the flexible plan to try to add more land buffering the land of the land trust. And that I certainly appreciate Vice Chairman Robbins taking the time to do the research on this. That was the genesis of which was our preliminary meetings, and to see so much information and to find that there is public safety benefits and reasons for this stuff, but also that we are not so close. And if I understood what he said correctly, that we are maybe 4 times further than what they recommend as the minimum site distance with the town's regulations here. So I do think that, just as an appeal to this board, I would like to say that this is a good project. I've seen developers try to have much bigger, much denser, piggish options here. And this is something where the McGriffs the entire time have listened to the comments of the board and the comments of the town. And we are trying to work. And I think the idea that the Grafton Land Trust doesn't represent a public benefit is certainly, to me, a stretch. And I know to some board members, it's obvious that what the Grafton Land Trust does is a public benefit. So I just really hope that we can work something out here, and that we, through the land trust, can find what's necessary to do this waiver so that we can pin this down and do this project, which is a benefit to this part of Grafton.
I think, in defense of the board, all the board members recognize that what the Grafton Land Trust does is a benefit, great benefit to the town. My question earlier had nothing to do with that. I have nothing but great respect for the land trust. My only caution is, and in a way Justin sort of answered that, is that we just have to be aware of what we do legally. I don't want it to come back and bite us because we're going through a private organization. And although it does benefit the town and all that, it still is private. But if that works, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. I just don't know the legalities.
And I certainly didn't mean to misconstrue your position on anything, Mrs. Hassinger. And I fully agree. Obviously, I'm a little biased here, but I see the value of lawyers in trying to hammer out the fine points of the details on this. So I think town council would be a benefit to this.
Well,
Have we collected all the information that we need in order to get to work on drafting a decision? In other words, are we at a point now where we've collected all the information we need and can consider closing the hearing, and with the board obviously to deliberate on a decision at some subsequent meeting?
I see a problem from what Rob says. Accepting the work as proposed at this point, I think he says, would be a problem for them because of the legal question of whether it's a facility or overall, which leaves us without a benefit proposal, if I'm hearing that right. And so one possibility is to continue looking for an eligible benefit. Chris.
So if I may, I think I can answer a couple of those questions. I think in terms of moving forward, I would ask that I do believe we have enough information to at least start drafting a decision. I would ask that the board keep the hearing open, if only for the purposes of receiving input from town council. So what I can do is reach out to town council and see if there is any issue with the board designating the Grafton Land Trust as the designee for any compensation. In the meantime, draft the decision. And I would note that I believe if that was an issue in terms of the Grafton Land Trust accepting money in this regard, I think, I do note that the Conservation Commission or Conservation Department has submitted capital plan requests for the upcoming years, looking at potentially demolishing an old shed building on town land, which is in significant disrepair. I apologize, I don't remember the exact address, but establishing a trailhead there. I believe the quote was upwards of $50,000, but this would obviously be a significant contribution to a project of that sort. So that's another opportunity for using the $13,000 we could direct it towards that or a similar project.
You're speaking of 46 Adams Road, right?
I believe so, yeah.
That's probably 60 Adams Road. 46 is the old barn. Well, is it the old concrete barn they're talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah, that would be 46.
Wow.
I
And
can see where that could be 50 grand to demolish that. There's also an old, kind of a broken down shed farther up the road, I think at 60.
The one on the High Point land, Pingarani's project.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of, I think, projects that the Conservation Commission is involved in that may benefit from some kind of financial assistance in this way. And obviously, we'd be happy to coordinate with the Grafton Land Trust as well. I believe in terms of completing that work and as many kind of public entities as many entities as we can get involved in these projects. That's how they get done. So.
So it's, it sounds like there continues to be the potential for thinking about other ways for some compensation or a public benefit to be applied. We all like the idea of working on the trail there, but with the issues, the known issues surrounding that, that's probably not something that can be considered as practical at this point in time. But yeah, I agree, Chris. If we, with some of the other discussions that can take place around the legal questions surrounding taking a contribution to the trust as a benefit from this, any legal pitfalls we need to look out for, any other sort of more creative ideas for some sort of really useful public benefit that can be provided to the town directly or indirectly. I will throw out just one other point of information. This is more for the board to consider in deliberating on the waiver. But I will point out that the board granted a waiver from the 600-foot separation some close to 25 years ago, but they waived it down to around 125 feet.
Where?
Essex Circle in South Grafton back in '96. That was waived, that separation was waived all the way down to about 125 feet. So waiving the 600-foot, the historical record gives us a lot of potential latitude. And I'm not going to hang my hat on the number 600 if I don't have if I can't explain why 600 is so important that I can't waive it. At this point, with the information in my head, I'm willing to be fairly flexible on considering a waiver.
I think we've talked about that enough. The question is how we proceed. It sounds like a gift or whatever that builds the trail would not be, or helps build the trail, would not be a good idea at this point. Are there other opportunities though for the land trust to benefit in some other way? I need to have a way. You can't, if we're going to have a decision, we're going to have what it is. So I need to get at what it is before we can have a decision. Yeah, Ellie.
What I do think is, I understand the hesitance to have a check as the donation on this, but I do think that is a potential to provide flexibility that it would be the land trust money to then spend once this clears itself up, which I think we all expect it will and hope it will. But the other option is that we defer to the board in terms of a flexibility on this, that if there is an in-kind or there's something else that makes sense, to go back a few moments in the discussion, we'd be happy to work with the board to find whatever works best for the public through, obviously, your position with broad latitude.
Okay. Chris, do you have enough?
Yeah, I think what, if everyone else was in agreement, I think the best path forward would be, the Grafton Land Trust could potentially look at some other specific examples that the board could consider. In the meantime, I'll reach out to town council in terms of, if we're able to submit that, how we can utilize any kind of in-kind donation. And then I do believe we have enough information to draft a decision. So I think that would be the easiest path forward.
Yeah, and I'll say, at least for my sake, if Mr. Aberg is willing to give, even 2 or 3 alternate ways the money could be used without physically having money in hand, like if something could be done toward a land trust property that's, reasonable in that same kind of ballpark, at least knowing what that is would help us. But I'm not saying we need that. I'm just saying could be useful knowledge to decide.
Can I lay in one idea or one question? Yeah. So since we're talking about trails, the Conservation Commission owns a number of trails as well. So if the question of a donation to the land trust turns out to be problematic, could I'm just speaking as a land trust representative for all open space, like Dave knows I do, that town-owned property be the in-kind recipient? Does it have to be land trust land because we're in a butter, or could it be town-owned land? Because if that's a possibility, it turns out the land trust does not have a monopoly on muddy trails. Now, that would also need to be looked at as far as the neighborhood comment. I think probably that was at yours earlier, that the neighbor keep it in the neighborhood factor would be another factor. But there's plenty of town-owned land that has plenty of muddy trails. I know Craig Dauphiné bugged me about Hassan-Messett Woods, and I say, Craig, it's town-owned land.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly no lack of opportunities for utilizing this kind of effort in town. I don't believe there's an issue with however the board directs those, the potential for funds. But, similarly, I'm not an attorney, and I think I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with town council having just, some input. And I don't think it delays our timeline in any way by reaching out.
So can we continue this to either the next meeting or the one after? It's going to be a little hard working across Christmas. During which time Chris will talk to the other people and find some way to structure something helpful. Because I think that's where this comes down.
Okay, and so I have an action item from the board to try to find a handful of potential sites for the McGriffs to consider as well. Is that? I'm happy to take an assignment. Just want to do the right one.
Well, you could work with Chris.
Okay.
Please do.
Will do. Got it.
Thank you, Rob.
It's a good time to request a continuation to one of our next 2 meetings, perhaps.
If it's acceptable for the board, I'd like to, while this is still at front of mind and we still have one more meeting in this oddly cursed year, I'd request that we could be on the next meeting agenda, please. And again, I will follow that up with the required written request to Natalia.
Right. I'll move that we accept the applicant's request and forthcoming written request to continue the meeting till December 28th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabu,
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carried. We're continued to the next meeting.
Thank you all again for your time.
We'll get to the end of this sooner or later.
We'll get it done eventually.
We'll get it done before the next spring's election.
Can I say one thing?
Hmm?
I just want to say thank you all for your time and have a Merry Christmas.
Well, we may see you hopefully before Christmas.
No. It's
28th is out.
28th.
We'll all be here in new sweaters on the 28th.
The other Christmas, Linda, the other Christmas, the Russian one.
Thank you all.
It's been incredibly difficult to keep track of the days and weeks this year.
Yes, I'm going to totally just cancel 2020.
We're in agreement.
Seconded.
Okay.
It has to be better.
When they used to change the calendar, they'd skip days or they'd put more days in. We're going to just take 2020 out of the calendar, the whole 360.
Good idea.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks.
Plan approval, 88 Adams Road.
So, Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting, there were a couple of points of discussion still sort of outstanding. One was in regard to the curbing, and Mr. McGoldrick had told the board that he had a conversation with Paul Conoyer, the head of DPW, that Paul had no problem with no preference between vertical or sloped granite curbing. And you asked that Mr. Conoyer also opined that he didn't have an issue with using the sloped granite on the intersection roundings. We exchanged emails, and he said that he had no trouble with sloped granite on intersection roundings. And the other issue was in regard to just the curb radii at the intersections. And I saw from your agenda that's a sort of a point of discussion for the board in general. And I also forwarded to you there's a plan just showing, sorry that the red doesn't pop out a little more. That's the intersection of the first cul-de-sac Liberty Circle with Libby Lane, and what's indicated in the very thick text in line is that the proposed radii at the two curves are 43-foot radius, which is just continuing the separation of curb from right-of-way of the rest of the roads. And what's shown in red, just as a contrast, is a 30-foot radius. And I just want to add that one thing I also forwarded to Mr. McGoldrick was a reference to a section in state regulations that was sent to us by actually the surveyor on this particular job. His son is in the state fire marshal's office, and they explicitly recommend or call for radii to be sufficient to serve a larger rescue vehicle. It really means a 40 or 42 foot minimum radius, and again, these would be 43. So those are the only two issues that I think were outstanding at the discussion at the last meeting. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to try and help answer them.
Dave did a memo on this with some drawings too. And so even, your radius is 43, which is, that's the relevant number relative to what the fire marshal said.
Yeah, the fire marshal, and again, it depends a little bit on which particular large truck a particular town is using. Typically, the WB-40 large vehicle will require a 40 or a 42 foot radius that be provided such that that large fire truck does not have to swing wide and get on the other side of the road to make the turn. So this is sufficient for those vehicles, yes.
Yeah, the various, some of the various source materials I looked at as I was drafting my memo indicated that for local streets like this, this is, kind of pre what the fire marshal is now recommending, but they've indicated that in the past it's generally been considered acceptable for local roads like this for larger vehicles, big trucks, tractor trailers, fire apparatus. It's generally considered acceptable for them to be able to make the turn by swinging through the other lane. The larger radius here helps vehicles like that to navigate the intersection while staying in the lane or encroaching on the other lane less. So there is an advantage, even though it's often not considered essential. And I also wanted to point out one of the other things I found in reading through our regs on this topic, that actually what's being proposed here, keeping the distance between the edge of pavement and the distance from the edge of right-of-way constant, is actually consistent. It's required by the regulations. So arguably, when you have a 30-foot radius at the property line and also a 30-foot curb radius, you're not in compliance with the language of our regulations.
Okay. The drawings are helping see a little bit better.
Yes.
Oh,
Bring up Dave's.
Hmm?
Can we bring up Dave's memo so Dave can walk through what exactly was the finding out, the thought, and the final recommendation?
oh,
Go ahead, Bob.
but before I forget, I still have the question about vertical curb at catch basins. We always had that, and I didn't see anything relative to that being good or bad. And I don't know whether there are details to show how that should be built.
I did hear James say that Paul Cournoyer said in an email that there was no issue with that. As I thought I heard him say, but I did not see that email either.
That's correct. So in discussion with Paul Cournoyer, that original discussion talking about the curb length, he was speaking additionally to around the drainage basins or catch basins.
Saying he's okay with not requiring vertical there.
Correct.
Every catch basin ends up having a short stretch, if you will, of vertical granite, as you've got the throat inlet at each grate. Just you have a transition out of that to back to the sloped.
Right, and that, I think that's what we have seen in the past, whether the transition goes to sloped granite or more often it goes to 8-pod berm type of curbing. And are we, I'm still not sure whether we're saying to do that in this subdivision or whether to have a slope design.
The proposal is for sloped granite.
Yeah, they're proposing sloped granite throughout the subdivision, as I recall.
You know, I've said this about 10 times and no one seems to understand what I'm saying. Granite, yes. Vertical granite at the catch basins or not, regardless of what's on down the way.
I think I heard them say right behind the catch basin, it's vertical, transitioning to sloped on either side. Is that what they said?
Correct. That's what we are proposing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, right on the topic of curbs, while we're on that topic, since Chris has put my curb memo up on the screen, which we hadn't talked about up to this point, it's another one of the things that came out of this. I'm looking at what we currently require for curbs versus what other communities require and what flexibility we might want to consider. Again, this was drafted more in the context of future changes to the subdivision rules, but it's relevant here to the waiver that's being requested. So what we require is not just at catch basins, but also around the roundings of curbs at intersections and extending 8 feet after the end of each arc. We require there, and also at particular grades. We specifically require vertical granite there, and everywhere else we require Cape Cod berm. So there's like, in effect, we're waiving 2 separate requirements if we're going to allow sloped granite everywhere except for the catch basins. Sloped granite around the intersection roundings. I will note that in my study of what other towns have done, a review of their curb requirements, there are a number of them that allow or even require sloped granite even at the intersections. And so we're discussing a waiver from vertical to sloped granite where we would normally require vertical, and we're being requested to allow sloped granite where normally we require Cape Cod berm. So I mean, again, much of this memo was more of a review for the purpose of looking at our subdivision rules, but relative to the requested waivers, there's really two aspects of our rules that we're being asked to waive in favor of sloped granite. Both of those are basically supported in the sense that other communities often allow or require exactly what the applicant is proposing here. So it's not out of line with what other communities do.
Well, I don't see any reason to not allow slope granite where we allow Cape Cod berm. So it seems to make sense that one thing we could do is when we change the rule, change it, but in this case, say, okay, along the same line as another acceptable material for a slope curb is granite.
Yep.
And that ought to be, the granite I think costs more than the hot mix, whatever it is.
Hot mix asphalt, formerly known as bituminous concrete.
Hot mix by hot mix something anyway.
That's a hot mix.
Hot mix. On the curve, we ought to be sure that our rules, when we're talking about the rules, ought to be sure that they do make clear what we want at basins and the like, in terms of verticalness and material. On the radii, I kind of like the idea that it's the same distance all the way around, although I don't know how much difference that makes, because on average you can't see where the property lines are that you're running parallel to. So the one thing I picked up, I think, in your memo, Dave, was that one of the primary effects of allowing the larger radius is people can go around the curves faster. And the question is whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, that's a whole nother question. In general, one could argue, particularly for subdivisions where we're not anticipating a lot of traffic on the roads, one could argue that smaller radii are better from a traffic calming perspective to encourage people to drive more slowly.
I'm pretty sure that our fire engines manage to get around a whole lot of intersection curves that are tighter than any of what we're talking about, one way or another.
Yeah.
They always say they'll get there.
They'll drive over the curb if they have to.
Oh, and whatever else is in the way. They have ways to cut through Other-
So one other topic on the radius at intersections, or one other point of information, which I haven't documented yet for the board, but as I was reviewing the intersection separation data, I also happened to look at, because I was reviewing regulations in more detail than this Pioneer Institute study showed up, but I looked at what they were requiring for curb radii, and it's kind of a mix. Some of them specify the radius of the minimum radius for the right-of-way line, which is what we do. Others are specifically specifying the minimum radius for the curb line, the paved road. So there's an interesting mix there. Most of them are in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 feet for their minimum radii. There is one that actually addresses both, 35 foot for the property line and 48 foot for the pavement, which roughly corresponds to the maintaining a constant distance between edge of pavement and edge of right-of-way. That's just sort of, that's maybe neither here nor there, but I think the observation that you mentioned, Bob, that the smaller radius makes for a slower speed turn. So it's sort of here you're balancing two things: a desire to keep traffic from going too fast, and a desire for fire apparatus to be able to safely navigate the turn.
Okay, well, I'm interested in us moving ahead here. Does anybody object to what I was saying about, in this case, allowing sloped granite wherever we allow berm?
I certainly don't object to that. I think that's perfectly reasonable. If the applicant wants to spend more money, we're not going to stand in their way. The effect is much the same in that case.
Okay, I think that can give some guidance on that point. The other point is, how do people feel about the tighter radius versus the larger radius? Don't know.
I don't know.
She has no idea.
I don't have an opinion.
I don't object to the larger radius.
You do not?
I do not object to the 43-foot radius. And in fact, arguably, as I said, that is more consistent with our regulations than a 30-foot radius would be.
Okay. Justin, any comment?
I have a question though. I think he said he stepped out for a minute, but he has his headphones on. So my question is, to summarize, if we have the larger radius, isn't that the more safer one for turns?
So the larger radius is going to be more accommodating to the fire truck, whereas smaller radius is going to be more in line with traffic calming and slowing the speed of a car coming around the corner. What the board may want to consider is, in terms of the roads servicing the cul-de-sac, having the 30-foot radius to slow traffic going onto those roads, and then the roads that are extending onto the main roads and connect the through roads, those could have the 43-foot radius. In all cases, you could have the property boundaries be 43-foot radius in order to allow future expansion of those curbs if needed.
I mean, 30 foot for the property line.
Sorry.
And to answer Bob's question to me, because I did hear him, was that I also do not object to the larger radius for the roadway. I don't have a particularly strong opinion if the applicant just wanted to leave it, the board wanted to leave it at 30-foot radius either, like Chris just mentioned. And as far as the curbs, I'm in agreement that they can spend more if they want to for those areas.
Yeah, I think there's one other part of the curb question, though. If I remember right, the applicant is also proposing sloped granite at the intersection radii, vertical granite only behind the catch basins. sloped granite area. So normally we require vertical granite on the intersection radii. Applicant, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, would like to use sloped granite there as well.
And did we get any input, Chris, on that question?
Yes, so DPW has noted that they have no issues with sloped granite being at both the curb radii and throughout the subdivision.
Okay. I'm a little uncomfortable with the larger radii in terms of allowing faster driving, faster traffic, but not, I don't.
Yeah, I would be interested in hearing that the difference in radius and difference in driving speed quantified in some way. I mean, if it means it's they're going to take the larger radius means they're going to take the intersection at a speed 2 miles an hour greater than they otherwise would. To me, that's a trivial difference. It's not worth arguing about. If it's a 10 mile an hour difference, if they're going to be able to take it at 40 miles an hour at a 43-foot radius and 30 miles an hour at a 30-foot radius, that's a significant difference. And I don't know that we have that answer. Visually, the difference in radii is not very dramatic.
Yeah, I think that we're at least leaning towards allowing the slope and allowing the 43. If there were a subdivision someplace around here that we could see that the 43 feet and the sloped radii between now and whenever we vote.
I'm not sure of the radius, but I believe in Westboro, the subdivision that was done, I know that is sloped. I can pull that up on Google Maps if the board wants to see.
I would suggest go out, I have to see how fast I can. On the ice and the snow. Anybody else have anything more to contribute on that one?
I'll just echo what the applicant previously said in the past. To me, the aesthetics of a uniform sloped granite, even along the radii itself, just to me looks better than the vertical. And if our DPW doesn't have a reason to say that one is necessary versus the other, I'm inclined to allow it for the radii. That's my.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen it though, and I'd like to, if there's a chance, it make me feel better.
Yeah, if there's a place that we can go, eyeball it to see what it looks like. One more piece of information relative to the difference between vertical and sloped is that, again, from my review of design guidelines and other towns, vertical curbs, whether granite or bituminous, become important when it's important for safety reasons to confine cars to the road. Or the car is going to have a time driving up over a vertical curb. If for example you've got a sidewalk abutting right at the curb, you want to kind of keep cars off the sidewalk. You want to make sure. But in typical subdivision situations, residential subdivision situations, there is very rarely a need. In fact, I think I remember running across one recommendation that said you really don't even necessarily want curbs at all on subdivision roads, but if you do, you might want sloped or berm type curbs. There are situations, higher speed roads, for example, where you don't want a vertical curb. That's of no relevance to us. But in situations where you need to keep cars from going off the road, that's where you really need the vertical. Short of that, vertical or slope doesn't really, it's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Okay. Seems to me that we have those points well enough together. Yeah, there you go. That's still like to see it personally.
And Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent example what is being zoomed in on of the transition from the vertical at the granite throat inlet, transitioning at the ends of away from the catch basin to the sloped. That is the rest of the curb.
Right. That may be that doesn't look exactly like what we see, but we see where it's transitioning to Cape Cod, more or less that. What else do we need to do tonight? Chris, what do we need to do?
In terms of, I mean, those are the two outstanding questions that the board had. So we could move to draft a decision if the board.
Close the hearing?
Yeah, unless the board feels that more information would be required.
Anybody think that we need any more information?
Sounds to me like we've heard everything that we need to hear before closing the hearing.
I move that we close the hearing
And
and direct staff to draft a decision.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
Ted and I. We
Aye.
already got,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carries, hearing closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, and Mr. McGoldrick, for all your time and your input. Thank you.
Okay. Back to action items. Back to action items. Recommendation to the select board, notice of intent to sell 59 Pleasant Street.
Yeah, so this is a property, I have some updates on this since the letter was sent to the various boards. So the Conservation Commission has recommended that the select board exercise their right of first refusal and move to preserve this property as open space. They found that there's a number of trails and other conservation pieces that are that this is an important kind of parcel in preserving those. The other, sorry, I'm just trying to get to my email. The other matter to consider is that in the request, they do in the agreement, they do include references to a residential subdivision or residential permits, and that all such residential permits will need to be granted in order to move forward with the proposed sale. What Ginny has pointed out is that per the regulations, this cannot be contingent on residential permits, and that it cannot be explicitly relating to development of a residential nature. And so in that regard, the request may be non-compliant with those regulations. I have been emailing Ginny up until before the meeting here, and I want to check to see if she has been able to get back to me. But those are kind of the complications in regards to this application.
I'll note that I just skimmed Trail Forks and I'm looking at the satellite image of this property, and I don't see anything that indicates there's a trail on the property. So I'm surprised if I don't know about it. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, Trail Forks may be incomplete.
Yeah, there is a drainage easement down through it, which takes water from the subdivision on the other side of the hill.
Yep.
There's a steep road, long, steep road over there. One of the first subdivisions that I sat on. I don't know what implication that may have. I can't see on the town GIS what happens after that easement, or even whether it's actually in use. I think it is, but I'm not certain that it is. I did notice a couple of things. The property card seemed to say that the appraisal was in the $300,000 range. The purchase and sale that we saw, I think, has 650,000 sale price, and the assessment for taxes is somewhere around $1,700. I want to know how I get that kind of tax.
61A.
Well, does it? No, I don't know about.
You might not explain it all.
I don't know about A, but I didn't think that you got just everything wiped out. That, and in any case, there is a question of if they sell it for $600 and some odd thousand, what taxes does the town? You know, you with the Chapter 61 stuff, you get back taxes, right? 10 years, it is, and I wonder how much town gets for this. So I am curious about the question.
Yeah, what I noticed about this property is this particular parcel abuts 3 open space parcels. Peters Estates open space, the River Glen Estates Conservation Area, and a Quinsigamon River Access Area that's owned by Fish and Game. The other 2 are Concom. So in my notes, when I reviewed that, I said I noted that I'd be very interested in Concom's opinion here. And so we heard what that is. I'll also point out that this, for the town to acquire this would be consistent with the Open Space and Recreation Plan, which recommends acquiring land that connects to existing conservation and recreation resources. So this would be very much in line with the Open Space and Recreation Plan, and it does abut some existing conservation areas, and that just, Concom has basically said that. So this is sort of what I found. I thought Concom might be interested in this. I think the legal questions Chris is raising may have to do with whether this request is even legitimately received. Does it meet the, and if it doesn't, if it doesn't meet the requirements, then basically the applicant has to resubmit a request that does meet the requirements. That may or may not be resolved yet. I don't know what Chris has found in the last few minutes.
And that's a good summary. So in emailing Ginny, I did email her back, but admittedly after hours today, when I saw her response, and my question was moving forward, does the board, was there any input on, can the board simply echo Concom in their approval, or do they have to weigh in and say that, the notice is inadequately received? Can they do both? And so I had been seeking a little bit of direction on that. But unfortunately, I didn't get that email until after hours today. And I don't see that I have a response from Ginny.
There is a clock on how long we as the town and the board have to act on this, correct?
Yes.
Correct. So it'll have to be acted on this Wednesday at latest.
By when?
Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the latest.
Cool. And why is it only just getting to us now?
I see December 1st, 2020 in this letter, and the letter was sent December 9th.
Letter was sent.
That was what I just was reading. What Chris had on the board.
Something like 90 days to make a decision.
And that one that he has up now, I just saw it received December, what was it now? November 19th.
I thought there was a 120-day clock on this.
No,
for the town to act, to make a decision.
I don't think so. Well, I think the town has like 90 days to exercise it. The trick is always you take up all your time deciding whether to say you're going to exercise it, and then you got to go find the money. And I'm not quite sure how that base gets covered. But somewhere in all, I'm not going to find it fast enough here. But I saw something about a representation that this was zoned agriculture, something like that. And it isn't. It's R20, zone residential.
It's zone residential. There was something on GIS for agriculture. I'll look it up again right now. But it wasn't zoning. So that's just to be clear.
So just in terms of timeline, I just want to note that the planning board received this application on November 30th, 2020. So the applications go out to the select board and the various boards. So we may have had a delay in getting the planning board notice
Well,
to us.
it looks like it should have been addressed. It should have been sent individually to each of us.
Correct, and I believe that
Requested for the selectmen, return receipt requested, certified mail to the assessors, blah, 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 planning board. So we should have, now I don't know who actually signs those receipts, but it should have come to us promptly.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Natalia put something in the chat that I think could have us move on a little bit faster from this. We do want to hear Ms. Kramer's opinion that Joanne Duncan said the select board is hearing for this on January 9th.
Right, I just see that. So I don't know that we have to make a decision.
I'll be so bold as to move that we pass over this agenda item and readdress it at our next hearing.
Here we go. Notice of non-exercise attached to the proposed form, blah, blah, blah. Refusal option has to be done within 120 days after the day following the day of deposit of this notice in the U.S. mail, which date of deposit is November 17th. So it's 120 days from November 18th before they can assume that we're not going to exercise it if we don't tell them.
Yep. Given the potential question of whether the notice is in the proper form, it seems clear that this board's opinion is that the town should exercise its right, provided that the notice is in proper form.
Well, not sure. Money always comes into this. If you're saying $650,000, these days getting overrides isn't all that easy. And
yeah, well, that doesn't affect my recommendation, my opinion that the town should exercise its right to purchase. That is, of course, goes without saying, that's conditional on the town being ultimately financially able to do that. Our position can be, yeah, we think it's a good idea. The town might, the select board might say, yeah, I know you guys all think it's a good idea, but we don't think the money's there, so we're going to turn it down.
Yeah.
We're recommending to the select board what we think,
I think that's a good approach.
as Concom is doing.
yeah, I think there is an element of judgment. You only ask the town for so much, and you want to decide what things you ask the town for. So I think it's something to think about, and that's why I mentioned it. I just found on here it is. The land is currently classified and taxed pursuant to MGL Chapter 61A, agricultural and horticultural. It's I don't know. Well, classified and taxed, perhaps, but it's
Yeah.
not.
The portion of the land closest to Pleasant Street has a land use table in our GIS as agricultural.
Well, I don't know what that, land use. Yeah.
Right,
Land
that-
use, yes,
That has nothing to do with zoning.
I agree.
It has been. That's been a field. I don't know what's been grown in it, but it's been a field going all the way back to when I was talking about the easement. Okay, so our suggestion is to get more input for our next meeting. Is that it?
I believe there was a motion made to that
Yeah.
effect.
That was my motion. I'm happy to withdraw if the board feels there is a better motion to be made to act on some way.
Your motion was to,
Was to table this agenda item
Until
until
the
our
next
next meeting.
okay. Prabhu, did you want
No.
something?
No, I was saying the next meeting.
Okay.
That's what Justin was saying.
I'm not sure we need one, but okay. Motion and
Second,
a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Dave.
Aye.
Hudson.
Aye.
Aye.
Prabhu.
aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Continue to the next meeting. Acceptance vote for the Tufts plan. Did anybody see any problems with their plan?
I read through it. It looked good to me.
Yeah, I think they're required to do this every,
Every so many years.
All right. I move that we accept the Tufts plan. Is that what I need to do for a motion?
yes.
Second.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Dave.
Aye.
Justin.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
Vote aye. Motion carries. Proposed FY21 planning budget. I looked through what you sent and I was confused about which year was which and who was doing what year and all of that, which is probably not at all your fault, Chris.
So that's how the budget document is laid out. So I'll do my best to try and clarify some of that. It gives the FY20 actual expense, the FY21 budget, which is this year's budget, but we're looking at the FY22 budget amount. So that splits that between the department request and the town the town administrator's office recommendation. Let me just do a quick screen share.
You said FY21 is this year's budget?
Yeah, so we're reviewing the FY22 fiscal year 22 budget, and that's what I wanted to put before the board. So this will.
The way they talk, the way they call the budgets is so. What we approve in the summer has next year's number on it. Or the spring. This spring we approved 21.
Right.
We're all end of 20.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah. Approved 21 this past spring. And
wise go July to June.
correct. So this is kind of standard, the budget statement. The one major thing that I think I wanted to bring before the board is looking at, I did include, so this is a position, I'm looking to reinstate the assistant town planner position. The way in which, so this was originally a full-time position that was then consolidated with the conservation agent. And there's funding that comes from various sources to fulfill that position. I'm requesting to keep that conservation agent and assistant planner position as is and as funded. Leah does a lot to help us with any of the sustainability related planning work, especially long range planning, in addition to pretty much anything that I can shovel onto her desk that's sustainability related, it goes there. So she does do a lot of work in that regard. But obviously the workload of the department is ever increasing. And there was discussion with the Affordable Housing Trust. We're currently doing the emergency rental assistance program for them. And they would like to do additional work with the planning department. And in that kind of preliminary discussion, they have expressed an interest in helping to potentially fund a position. What I've done is there were line items in the previous budget for intern positions. What I've done is I've removed those requests and consolidated them into this entry-level staff planner position. So this would be part-time entry-level pay. But what it does is it gets us a position to help with some of the tasks in terms of planning related work, and we'll expand that capacity and hours for us to complete tasks, and hopefully help free up my hands to do some additional long-range planning and take on the increased tasks that we're seeing and workload that we're seeing. To make it palatable, what I've done is, by doing the part-time and entry level, it becomes a fairly smaller request. The position, as it's entirely funded, is looking at $20,000, just over $20,000. I still have to work with the Affordable Housing Trust to see how much they'd be willing to commit. In previous years, when Joe had looked to fund this position with the Affordable Housing Trust, they had talked about $10,000 as a potential commitment, and so that would fund half of this position. In talking with Bruce Spinney, he indicated that he thought that it had been closer to $20,000, but for whatever reason, they only requested the $10,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust. So depending upon how the discussion goes with the Affordable Housing Trust, we may be able to fully fund this position, depending upon their level of commitment. Obviously, if they're paying for the full position, they're going to want a lot of those hours to be dedicated to them. But I think that's something that we can work with them. And I just, in discussing with the board, I did want to bring this budget to your attention to get your recommendations one way or the other, and preferably your endorsements in terms of the budget this year. So I know that may not have been done in the past, but I know there has been discussion when I came on board that the board wanted to be more involved in these types of processes. And I do want to work to be more inclusive of these processes with the board. So if there's any comments, I'm happy to go into any of the details of the budget.
Yeah, I'm mostly interested in the ask and how it shows up at one meeting. I think what I'm seeing here is that the town administrator is on board with the proposal, but 211, 802, and the 10050.
Yes, so I should clarify the, at least in terms of this is still the draft budget. I believe the town administrator requests at this time are autofill, so they will be going through those, and that they may be subject to change, is what I should say.
He hasn't necessarily said something one way or another.
Correct.
So I guess my only high level question briefly is, does, because in my mind it may come up at town meeting, why does planning need another staff member if they already have, 2 planners according to the budget? Even though Leah is shared with conservation, does she do about half for us and half for conservation, or is it a little bit more leading toward conservation in her workload, just to kind of get an understanding?
So the way in which the work is, in order to consolidate those positions, the way the work has been divvied up is that where there's overlap with conservation and planning activities, typically there is a high workload of conservation related activities. And so where those overlap, that's typically where we've seen, since she would be involved anyways, that's where we see the workload being most efficiently handled in that way. I think there are additional activities that the planning department is undertaking. Obviously, the administrative tasks of the planning board, we work through those very diligently, but there's additional long range planning. We're putting a request in for moving forward with the master plan update, which we anticipate is going to be a heavy workload administratively and staff wise. So having an additional assistance and hours in that regard is going to be helpful. And then, per the select board's kind of goals for as we formulate those strategies, we're looking at developing a sidewalk program, going into the Complete Streets program. So there are a lot of these long range planning and other aspects that we anticipate are going to be coming online, and we're happy to move forward with those. But in terms of completing those tasks and still maintaining the level of service for the planning board, we do see a need for additional hours and opening up that capacity to do it and do the tasks well.
I think that the justification, explanation, gonna come when we get close to town meeting. There'll be a lot of talk about it, or I guess we don't necessarily have to officially approve it, but we can support it.
I make the motion that we formally endorse the proposed budget as the planning board.
Someone second?
Second.
Oh, I think Greg will may have. Any discussion? Hearing none. Dave?
Aye.
Justin?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Bradley?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Moving on. Zoning Board of Appeals request for comments on Prentice Place. We know almost nothing about Prentice Place. We don't get any say-so about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the planning board did the zoning board of appeals, this is the 40B before them. They did specifically ask for comments from the board. So, if there's comments that the board would like to submit, I'm happy to include those. Let me just see if I can pull up the plans quickly.
I for one am not sure what we can provide as the board for them.
Yeah. I think I'm not sure whether Chris has other opportunities to make input. If this is his opportunity, then if you have anything, Chris, that you think should go in, put it in.
Yeah, and that's I'll just mention, I did a kind of look at the plans and just some kind of things that I thought might be asks that the zoning board might want to consider. They may not. But in terms of the project, in terms of the way that 40Bs go, typically the board probably is well aware that they're limited in what they can really require. Correct. But one of the things that I think is usually beneficial is looking at in negotiating 40Bs is looking at what are mutual benefits and mutual goals that the developer might be able to add into or assist with that that it's going to overall help their project as well as help the town. Obviously, per our regulations, I would think that most likely you would include, if we were looking at a VMU district, which again, we can't really require this in 40B, but if we were looking at that development, these buildings would be pushed closer to the street line and the parking would be placed more behind. I did note that they're putting the largest massing of the structures next to this commercial property. And although they're providing connections to these are actually parks. There's the ball fields over in this location, as well as a large kind of open space and park to the north of the property here. They do pedestrian access here, but I would consider including either more robust intersection treatments here or the potential of a bus stop. So one of the nuances I've learned in dealing with developments in these kind of private ways is actually public buses are not allowed to access these interior roads. Obviously, these developments, will not always attract a lot of school-age children, but there will be some school-age children nonetheless. And so providing some kind of a bus pickup facility or pickup drop-off facility, whether it's for buses or for Ubers or what have you, I think sometimes those facilities can help with reducing the traffic impacts of these 40B developments. Sometimes the people in these developments may not want to have a car, may not have access to vehicles as readily as others. And so in terms of providing alternative means of transportation, I think those are a critical benefit both to the town and in terms of traffic and also to the potential tenants in the future. So those were the kind of comments that came to my mind that I may suggest as general planning considerations. But beyond that, still noting that the ZBA is limited in what they can impress upon the developer.
I'm also having you put forward those ideas. Vote. Need a vote?
No, but if there's additional comments that the board would like me to include, I'm happy to include those. But
I think if anybody has something, we should send it to you. Anybody else want anything on this one?
I didn't really come up with anything. Looking at these things, looking at these plans, these plans have gone through a number of iterations since this project first began its review, and I couldn't tell from looking at this what's changed. Because that's if anything, I'd be interested in commenting on any changes that have taken place. But if there are no major changes with this plan compared to previous plans, then I'm not sure that I have anything more. I mean, I'll look at it one more time and send you anything I might come up with. But I really don't. I didn't see anything at looking through it once or twice. Didn't see anything that I thought it would be worth commenting on. And again, as I say, I don't know. I know this project has gone through many changes since it was first proposed, and I don't know enough of the history of it in any detail. I mean, I could pick out something here that I thought should be changed, but there's a good chance that that's already been dealt with. That either what I wanted was they tried before and it didn't work or whatever. So I'm a little hesitant to make to spend a whole lot of time looking at this.
Yeah, well, you might send your comment might be if this hasn't already been considered, seeing as how we don't get to know what you're doing very well.
Yeah.
And more or less along those lines. Is that enough on this? I'm gonna have to change Linda's label so we have the name of Burgess.
He doesn't vote.
He doesn't vote though. He's not allowed to vote. That's a public meeting, so I guess it's and you're not seeing Fingal over here, the golden. All right, Mill Development Overlay District, litter review and general discussion. There's nothing new, is there?
No, there's not. I apologize. I haven't had time
Alright.
to expand on that.
We've had some discussion already about the subdivision rules and regs. A good bit of what Dave did. We made some progress on that. Is there any more progress that we need to make tonight?
Yeah, I can't think of anything. I didn't realize I don't have anything I wanted to spend much time discussing tonight. Just to call the board's attention again to the memos I drafted on intersection radii, curbs, and distance between intersections. Those are all. I tried to dig up a lot of information that could be useful as we consider what we might want to change. And we kind of touched on some of that discussion earlier tonight. I don't need to repeat it now. And two of the memos I just got posted today, so I doubt that anybody's had much time to read and digest them. So it's more reading material for the next opportunity we do have to spend some time on this. And again, I'll just remind the board that we've got the document, a revised document with all sorts of mostly little changes that at some point we need to go through and discuss any of those changes that look to be possibly non-trivial, worth us talking about. But I don't think we want to spend time on that tonight. We've already been we've gone for quite enough. If anybody has any thoughts or anything that you would be interested in digging up further details that I might be able to follow up on, let me know.
I did get a chance to look at them, Dave, and I was thinking very good work. Thank you. Bills. Any bills? No bills? Hello?
Sorry, let me just.
No bills. Minutes of previous meeting. Minutes.
Yeah, we had to be brief because it was that one quick meeting.
Oh,
I'll move that we accept the minutes of the December 9th meeting with any adjustments to be made during discussion.
Second.
Prebu waved, but I heard you, Dave.
I'm not too sure. Are you guys able to hear me? I keep saying second or I say aye. It never seems to come out the other end.
All right, I think we should give Prebu credit for the second on this since he did try.
Next time I'll do this. I did second.
Pistols at 20 spaces. Okay, yeah, and I think you have a squelch control that needs adjusting. Prebu. That was moved and seconded, I believe. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave.
Aye.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Staff report.
I have to do an update for the select board, so I'll leave my comments for that. None other tonight.
Okay. Correspondence. I didn't see anything.
There was something. I reviewed it. Nothing out of the normal.
Right. Anybody else on correspondence? Moving on. Planning board representatives to town committees and CMRPC. Anybody?
I can give the library building committee update. It's progressing well. The last I saw from Andy's report was we are still about a little under $500,000 below the approved number. So we are still marching towards that. And that's a job cost report. That's the projected cost to the end of the project. So if all things go well, the earth doesn't shake and the skies don't fall, we'll still be under the approved budget.
And the brick is starting to look pretty good down.
Has there been any? Yes. Has there been any change orders that were of anything substantial over the last 2-3 months? Offhand?
No, there are planned change orders. So Andy brings it to the committee. He talks about it. the ones that have been that are come up for approval, and the ones he gives a projection that these are going to come in potentially. So
Yep.
there were no surprises, if that's what you're asking, Justin.
Yeah, I was more asking, was there anything substantial that was like not, that might have been new and a substantial kind of thing, like a substantial in cost or substantial in scope?
No, not now. So now we are in the superstructure. So typically those
Yeah.
were the ones when we were in the
Yeah.
substructure. So we are gone past that. So we are in a better place now.
Do they have a anticipated opening date yet?
No, it is as per schedule. The June, I think it was June, is when they are planning. That's the original planned schedule. So I didn't hear any planned opening date as yet.
Look, there are windows in, so I suspect that it's pretty well closed to the weather, and they'll be able to work all winter.
The
Inside.
interior works have started already.
Okay, anybody else with any other reports?
Yeah, from the Open Space and Recreation Plan. I want to make sure everybody's aware of the forum that's coming up Thursday evening by Zoom at 7:00. A forum to get public comments and discussion about the Open Space and Recreation Plan that we're hoping to finalize real soon now. And for anybody watching, the information about the forum is on the town website under the planning board. Chris, could you get them, if they haven't already, haven't checked it, make sure that gets to the front page of the town website, the announcement for that, maybe even a clickable Zoom link. I just want to make sure that we've given the public as much opportunity as we reasonably can to participate. This will be very helpful in getting us to wrap up the final submission of the plan to the state for their final approval, which we're hoping to get submitted before the end of January.
Speaking of the website, it reminds me something came up elsewhere. Most of the planning board stuff you folks do, right? You posted. Because the question came up in another committee, whether we currently, with the town clerk out, whether we actually have the ability to, down that way, to update the site. There's information that hasn't been posted. I'm just wondering whether whatever his assistant or is able to handle that stuff.
Is it the clerk's office that hasn't posted, they haven't updated?
That's where the finger was pointed.
Okay. Yeah, I believe they have the capacity. If not, I know Cindy might be able to. So, I mean, if you could get more information on what hasn't been updated, I'm happy to
The question,
stir the pot.
they have the ability, the access, but the question was whether he has the training. Okay, okay. Is there nothing else on reports? All right, is there anything else that may legally come before us? Apparently not.
Motion to adjourn. I'll second. Dave beat me briefly.
Our puppies are restless.
The puppies are restless tonight. Moved and seconded, not debatable. Dave,
Aye.
Dustin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
I vote aye.
And ask Ferguson.
We're out.